Welcome back to BT. We've never had to vote during a pandemic, but that's the reality right now when British Columbians head to the polls on October 24th. With more on this, we're joined by Andrew Watson from Elections BC. Andrew, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Now, obviously, people don't want to have to choose between their health and exercising their right to vote. So how will things look different at the polling stations this year for the provincial election?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something we've been thinking a lot about. And certainly for us, this election, a focus will be accessibility, making sure that voters have lots of opportunities to cast their ballot during the election, but also voting safely. So for voting in person, we've been preparing a number of pandemic protocols to make sure that can happen safely. We've been working with the Office of the Provincial Health Officer to plan for that. And these include things that you'd expect, things that we've all had to get used to during the pandemic. Physical distancing, capacity limits within voting places to help ensure that physical distancing, and things like hand sanitizer stations so that voters can sanitize their hands before and after they vote, and also having personal protective equipment in place for our election officials, like masks and barriers, things like that. So all those voting safely measures will be a focus for us this election, but also, as I mentioned, making sure that voters have lots of opportunities to cast their ballot. There'll be 7 days of advance voting, and voting by mail is an option for any eligible voters. So if voters prefer to vote by mail, they can request a voting package from Elections BC.
And we're not talking about just protecting voters. We're talking about candidates and election workers as well, correct?
Yeah, we're trying to foster that voting safely message, for all participants in the electoral process. So we'll be providing guidelines that we've developed with the provincial health officer that campaigns can look to, but also absolutely anyone in the voting place. So that's voters, our election workers, and also candidate representatives.
And Andrew, will masks be mandatory at the polling stations?
We encourage voters to wear a mask at the polling station. Certainly we'll have them available for voters if they don't have their own. We'll be following public health guidelines that they won't be mandatory, but certainly something that we encourage. We're also looking for voting places that are larger for this election so that we can ensure that physical distancing is taking place. So certainly they'll be available and encouraged. And as I mentioned, voting by mail is also a great option if voters don't wish to wear a mask while they're in a voting place.
And with respect to things like showing identification, how will some of the familiar procedures look differently during this election?
Yeah, so there will be a number of differences that voters may notice. So in terms of the election officials at a voting station, there will only be one. Usually there's a team of two. There'll always be at least 2 election officials in the voting place. Voters will make an oral declaration that they're eligible to vote. Usually they sign a voting book to do that, but we're trying to reduce contact intensity wherever possible. And oftentimes in past elections, voters will hand their ballot back to an election official for the counterfoil to be removed before the ballot is placed in a ballot box. Again, to reduce contact intensity, we'll be asking voters to do that themselves for this election. So small changes like that voters can expect once they get into the voting place.
All right, and Andrew, just very quickly as we wrap, what about if you're at risk or you have accessibility issues during voting time?
Yeah, so again, vote by mail is a great option for those voters. They can request a vote by mail package on our website at elections.bc.ca or by calling us at 1-800-661-8683. And I'd encourage anyone who has any concerns about how they'll cast their ballot in this election to contact Elections BC. So certainly mail will be a key focus. And for a small number of voters, for voters with sight impairment or disabilities, or voters who may be self-isolating within the last week of the campaign, we'll also have an assisted telephone voting option available for voters who meet those specific criteria.
All right, we showed the website there. A lot of information. Thank you so much for making sense of it, Andrew.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much.
All right, you have a great day. That's Andrew Watson from Elections BC, and much more BT to come after this.